Well, President Book, thank you so much for joining us and sitting down with us. I know we have a limited time, so we're just going to hop right into the questions. What is the main driver, do you see, of hopping into this fall semester in person and on campus?
Well, there's no question, the research is clear that face-to-face learning is more effective. It's more effective from a peer-to-peer, so you're in class, right, and people raise questions and the spontaneity of that. And that peer-to-peer engagement is critical because you think about the students far outnumber the faculty member, right, in a class. And part of what we do in the admissions process is think about who's in that class and how does that advance learning. So being able to continue forward in a healthy and safe, if you can do it, and we learned that we could, working with public health experts. And so it will be different, but it was important to press forward to achieve our mission as much as possible in this environment.
What do you say, though, to the faculty, students, staff, and community members who say, why take the risk, right? Why risk anything at all, right? There could be some safety hazards that we face no matter what time of year it is, whether it be cars driving through campus, but why take an extra risk knowing that the coronavirus is still very prevalent here in North Carolina especially?
Well, the coronavirus is here to stay, right? It's not a matter of we're going to get through this and then the coronavirus is going to be over or gone. So part of what we're managing is how to continue forward with coronavirus. So I would share with them that this is, we certainly are not coming back like we used to. We've restaged and reset and decompressed. I think these are the new rules for living. Right, I respect this disease. I think it's dangerous, right? And so I'm protecting myself from it every day. This is the new way of living for all of us.
I want to ask you about something that's planning on happening later today. The Boldly Elon Solidarity Collective is going to host a die-in outside of Mosley, and they have several different issues that they want the university to specifically address. Why do you think students feel the need that they need to go as far as to essentially lie dead in front of Mosley to have their voices and concerns heard?
Well, we certainly have heard those concerns, so I would say that they don't need to go lie in, but that's happening across college campuses. I saw UNC had a die-in, and I saw that the SEIU was very active in staging these with across, I saw University of Georgia had one, and you know, I think people are working very hard to have use unique ways of telling their stories, of making their points, and of course there's the visual of that. And but I hear that. I heard their concerns. And also, it's okay if this isn't the right time to press forward in your education. It's okay to take a semester. I took a semester when I was in college. So I'm respectful of it. I'm confident we've staged our campus where people can remain healthy and safe. But I also am respectful that it can be a scary time for people and that our health is uniquely ours, right? That's a very individual experience, and that people should be empowered to make those individual choices, and they can opt out for a semester.
People say, right, they can make their individual choices of whether they want to take classes online, whether they want to take a semester off. But something else they're standing for is their concerns about the general Alamance County community, right? We often talk about the Elon bubble, which I'm sure certainly exists to an extent. But there's also a community outside of Elon, and there are risks associated with bringing in people across the country to Elon's campus. What do you say to those concerns about what threat we might play to the larger Alamance County community?
This is top of mind for me. And I spoke to the community about it yesterday, and I also spoke in a video to students about it. That one of the key challenges we have right now is that the best science that we have about wearing a mask, about social distancing and washing our hands, and those protocols are all dependent on human action, right? And that's what I think makes people feel vulnerable, right? Is that it requires humans to, and we know that humans are not always, right, able to deliver on their hopes. It actually reminds me of a moment in my own life when in the 80s we adopted a mandatory seatbelt law across the country. And so it used to be that, and it probably still is, that you get a ticket if you don't. And we've done the same thing with cell phones, is that we realize that it's people's habits, right, and behaviors that create risk. And so you can build these tools, seat belts, and now we have lights about changing lanes and all of that. But it still requires me, when I get in the car, to pull that seat belt. And that's really what we're teaching ourselves, and we're not going to be perfect at it. You know, we're seeing evidence of that all across America on TV. We're not going to be perfect, but we're going to get better and better at it. And so I've talked to students, this is the expectation. It's a requirement.
One of the things that has been required is I've taken my at-home kit test, the COVID test, I'm sure you have as well. Part of the concern is, why are we being tested, right, 2-3 weeks prior to coming to campus? Is this just a safety measure to make the campus feel more safe? What's the purpose of that? Because even when I take the test, right, I could go out and do something the next day and still not even have my results back.
Yeah, I do think testing and the period between taking the test and when you find out your results, right, there's inherent a lag in that right now, and we don't have a spontaneous enough availability of a rapid test right now. I think I believe the recommendation from the task force was correct in that the testing gives everyone a sense of the process of how we are tested, how that works, and it also establishes a good baseline for the incidence of the disease across our student body, which was, as you said, around the world. So I think partly it's the exercise as well as the information. It's not perfect, right, to give a test and then arrive 2 weeks later, but it did help us diagnose, I don't know what the number is today, but a handful of asymptomatic people in our community of future students, faculty, and staff, and so that they could isolate themselves and quarantine themselves. So we did, in that process, prevent the spread of the disease either in their home communities and their families and here on campus.
You say it's an exercise, but this is an exercise that comes with a cost, right? $129 some students will have to be forced to pay if it is not covered by their insurance. If it is not, they are not able to get some of it reimbursed by the school. So it's an exercise that comes with a cost, and that's the other side of the argument. What do you say to that? Why not just get on campus and begin the stratified testing that you've already said that will be in place throughout the semester?
At the end of the day, we debated it. We looked at all of the data and decided this was part of an essential reopening plan. Still, I'm actively lobbying and hoping, as much as the law allows me, to ask our federal government to cover these opening costs for the community. I'm still hopeful that that might happen. There's a bill pending on the second wave of CARES rounding that does include opening costs. I was pleased we were able to leverage our location with LabCorp so close to reduce the testing information we're going to have, because those tests are being conducted here and LabCorp will be on site for the surveillance testing. We'll get those results back within those 48 hours that we think are so critical for our response. And I was pleased that there's no out-of-pocket expense, that everyone could get tested, and the cost issue we could continue to work to mitigate. And of course, we're also, if people have financial difficulty, are making that a component of our response to the testing costs.
Obviously, the budget is going to be a major concern moving into this year. There's already projections that all the safety measures, the technology is going to be in between $5 and $7 million. But I want to talk about admissions, right? We have a freshman, a first-year class coming in that has never experienced this, and neither has the university either. As of earlier this week, deposits were down $5 million behind last year's number. How many students do you know have deferred to next semester or just until a later semester? And how does the university retain these students moving forward? How do you keep these students engaged, given that there are going to be some freshmen here, right? They're going to be disconnected slightly with their incoming class.
So we've been closely monitoring. I'll speak to the retention question first, Jack, is that we've been closely monitoring retention and accelerated efforts through admissions and in an effort to make sure we were talking and to families about what we were doing, that we are working to reinvent the student experience as much as possible. But it will be different, right? And so there are some unknowns about how this first year class will respond. I just talked to the orientation leaders yesterday, and there's going to be a learning curve for everyone in this, and particularly our first year students who don't have a frame of reference for what Elon was like before we started to address COVID-19. So that retention effort is underway, and we're working closely on it. The second question you asked about in the admissions is about deferrals, and we were very liberal in our deferral communication, right? And because we understand that for some students and their families, they don't want to have a muted first or a different first year than they were anticipating. So we do have deferrals for the spring. I think that number is around 25. Where rather than come in the fall, they want to hold and come in the spring. For those, we'll have an orientation program. We'll have Elon 101. So some of those things that you traditionally do in the fall, we will offer those in the spring. And then for some of our international students who are really hoping for a 4-year USA kind of collegiate experience, they've deferred till next fall. And I think that number, if I'm correct, is also around 25 or 30. And so what we'll do for those is to stay in good communication all year, right, as we do with other students who declare early to Elon.
I want to move to talking about athletics. This week, Elon Athletics announced that they were going to suspend their fall season, hopeful that they can move some things like football, volleyball into the spring. But Elon Athletics brings in approximately $4.9 million every year. It's not a huge money maker for the school, but it does make up a percentage. What's going to happen to these employees, right, throughout this fall semester, whether it be coaches, trainers, senior staff of athletics? What's going to happen to them? Will they be furloughed? Is there a possibility they can be even maybe laid off as well?
I'm going to just say that's true for everybody. There's a possibility, right? We're in a really dynamic environment, and we have modeled what if you go totally online and you don't have a residential experience here on campus. So it was prudent for the university to have budget crises modeling, and we've done all that. To speak to the athletics question, so I have a call actually today with the Colonial. We're anticipating developing a spring season, shifting these fall sports to a spring season. And so we might be playing football in February, which would be really, so it's different, but it'd be exciting. I think that to have the view that what a coach does is prepare students to compete is a limited view of what athletic coaches do. They actually serve as mentors, as great advisors to students. They also teach many of our physical education courses here on campus, and so they will continue that work with a really important cohort of students, our student athletes. And so we have 400 student athletes that count on those coaches as their advisors and mentors as they balance life as an athlete and an academic life, which is no easy task. And I would say in this disrupted environment, that mentoring is even more critical.
But do you think that athletics, given that so much has been cut back of the program, right, they will not be performing the same? Of course they have their mentoring relationship. Do you think, though, that department could be more threatened compared to other areas of the university?
I think that part of what happens, Jack, is that when you suspend a season, for example, you also are suspending all of those costs. So that's going to, some of the deficit is going to be natural, right? I don't have the cost of travel for teams this fall. I mean, that's one of the huge costs that we have in athletics. But I do think because anything that is not in the essential academic core of learning is more vulnerable to layoff and furlough on a university campus. The most essential thing any university does is the teaching and learning in the classroom, right? That makes everything else a vulnerability. One of the best expressions I've ever heard about residential campuses was from the former president of Princeton, who wrote that a college campus is, and all the players, athletics and staff, think about residence life staff and your career services and your faculty. It's a great orchestra. So, and in order to have that music, you need all of those parts. And if you take out the trumpets, it doesn't feel or sound the same way.
So quick question, so athletics is equally to be furloughed or layoff than any other department?
That is
on
not
campus?
faculty.
Not faculty?
Yeah, because, teaching is the center, right?
Okay.
So I would say, so obviously we're doing a lot of modeling, but if you don't have athletics, if you would just, in the same way if you don't have a residential campus, it would dictate how those things are prioritized.
I want to move on to some student concerns that many have questions on. First of all, being students on campus jobs, right? We're hearing from some departments saying if we go online, right, there isn't going to be the emergency pandemic leave anymore. For example, Mosley Front Desk has already said they were doing some remote work before. Now they said if we move online, that's no longer an option. Some people really depend on this money from their on-campus jobs. What is that going to look like for students who rely on this income that the university does provide?
Yeah, I think it creates a vulnerability. The federal government stepped in last time. We were able to continue our pandemic leave. I think if that were to be extended for long periods of time, the university would not be able to do that. I do believe that if the country would head in that direction again, that there would be another round of federal funding to help.
How much are you relying on this federal fund? You're talking a lot about federal funding, and right now it's kind of seems like a stalemate in Washington, right? Neither side seems to be making too many advances. How much is Elon University, and really do you think higher education across the board, relying on this financial aid that could be provided?
I think it's had a huge impact on higher ed, the previous round of funding. I would say here at Elon, you're asking a question about the budget is built on the number of students we have. So anytime that you have less students, the budget constricts because you don't need as many classes. You don't need as much of this. So some of it's very natural, right? It's not really a cut. It's because, you didn't have the need. So it worked. We've also had some really natural budget, like we're not traveling. That was a significant component of the budget. We're not going to have as much catering. That's because we're virtual in our meetings. And so there are some easier buckets to make budget cuts.
I want to get back to students here. How will students be held accountable for a time that is both spent on campus and there is a violation of these new rules and off campus? How is the university going to directly handle that?
So we've developed a series of new policies related to, it's actually our policies, but what we did was we made it an offense, right, to host a party, to attend a party. Right? So people need to be very aware that we thought through, if you're in hosting or attending, that exceeds the limitations of what the
And that's the governor's limitations.
Yes, the governor's limitations. And then also, if you're not wearing a mask, the truth be told, I personally, I don't get in my car anymore and forget to put on my seatbelt, but it's a new habit that people have to remember to put your mask on. And also, I saw some students walking too close yesterday without their mask. They were outside where you're not required to always have a mask if you can maintain social distancing, but they weren't. They were too close. And I said, hey, arms up. And I just said, and everybody else should say, hey, arms up, mask up, arms up, because your arms, right, it's about 6 feet from arm to arm. And so that can give you an easy, quick, and it's that friendly accountability, right? I'm not saying that to be punitive. I'm saying that because when you are taking risk that we humanly can prevent, I want for this campus, for you to be healthy, and I want myself and our community to be healthy.
But what should students expect as far as the repercussions, right? We're hearing about suspension, right? We're hearing about these other things. In a direct message to the Elon community, what should students expect? What should the students expect when they go off campus to a party? What should they expect when they're at a gathering that is exceeding the limits?
They should expect that will be interrupted either by Elon Police, Town of Elon Police, or our local police. When we have visibility of it, they should expect that there will be consequences for that. If the host of the party should expect that they will be asked to leave and come back when they're ready next semester. Whoever attends that party is also responsible for that moment, and they should expect that there will be some probationary, some lack of freedoms from those. If you think about what we do typically there, you can't be a leader of an organization, you can't go on study abroad, sponsored by the university. So everybody should look at that student code of conduct and say, this is what will happen to me, because it will happen. It will happen because we are going to be watching.
Looking back, right, we talked about, back in April when we spoke, you said that, Elon's, canceling Elon's Florence program was your toughest decision up to that point. Do you still believe that that was your toughest decision? I mean, first of all, April seems like years ago at this point. But looking back, what do you think the toughest decision has been for you? Here we are in August.
Well, they're all tough, I will say. I think partly is the decision to reopen has definitely been a tough decision, right? And so you're getting a lot of feedback, information, talking to public health experts and doing that. I think about the pace of change, how we can move forward on the diversity, equity, and you can't do everything, right? So I'm managing a budget and I'm asking myself, what else can we do here? And some of it is dollars, but a lot of it's mindset, right? It's about the way we think and teaching and learning. So how can we turn that dial? And that's where we've put one of our first initiatives is to say, hey, let's build a curriculum that lands us more about the environment we want. I think Florence was especially a challenging decision because it was the first. Like, how are we is really becoming aware of coronavirus, what was happening around the world, and I remember having this moment that the healthcare system in Italy was going to be overwhelmed. And then, of course, I'm like, is Alamance County ready? Is it, so I just remember waking up to the fullness of why coronavirus can be so dangerous. It's not only the disease, it's how our medical care system can treat that disease. So I do think that Florence was this moment when we realized that coronavirus is here to stay and is going to change the way our future looks.
Are there any decisions looking back, right, we're only in August, here we go, we're starting this fall semester. Is there anything that you wish you did differently or regret doing between the pandemic, between everything that's ensued following race relations? Maybe you don't live with regrets, but is there anything you wish you maybe had done differently?
Well, I think that as a leader, every day I get feedback about my decisions. And it's a hindsight's 20/20 kind of thing, as I learn more, I think, wow, I wish I had been aware of that when I did X. I wish I had known this. And then there's always unintended consequences. You make a decision, and then something negative happens out of it, and that was never what you intended. And then there's really tough decisions like the one with mutual aid right now, where we're in an agreement and I need to protect our campus. So that committee, so you're balancing.
Do you think students understand what the mutual aid agreement really does for the campus?
I think that, and I don't know who wrote this story, maybe Anton Delgado wrote it. Somebody, and it was on, y'all had it, I thought there was good coverage of it. If people have taken the time to read that story, I think they'll get a balanced view of what the real issue is. I think, and this is just generally, I think people have one source of information, I won't call it news, and that they rely on it. And the reason I'm not calling it news is because it's not presented in the objective, balanced expertise of journalism, right? So people get sources of information, and people surround them with what they agree with because they feel comfortable in that space, right? It's really uncomfortable to be in spaces with people we disagree with. What I hope for this campus is that we can do a better job of having good discourse, and that we do not adopt a cancel culture on learning, right? Of course we're learning. Of course I learn. I need a space where there is grace for that, where people are able to have honest conversations. I mean, that's how we're going to advance change. If we have a cancel culture that silences people, I promise you this democracy will not work.
My final question is, what do you think the biggest misconception is about you during this time and about the university?
Oh, I don't know. That's interesting. I hope people realize that, I hope people understand that we've been working long days, that we're listening. I hope people understand that decision making is complex, right? And that, as my mom told me, every decision has losses, right? And we recognize that, is that when you move out, there's going to be, some losses in that. I hope people realize that we are I think about students every day. That the missing thing on this campus was not, it's beautiful, but the missing thing is the energy and excitement of learning. And that's what we really have been missing. And so I'm hoping, even masked and socially distanced, that students come back ready to learn. I'm confident we can have learning and we can have peer engagement in a healthy and safe way. And I think that's why people want to be back, is there's the comfort from that, that we get from each other. And we absolutely need each other right now in this very disrupted time.
Well, President Book, I appreciate you taking the time with us. Best of luck
Thank
at the
you.
start of the school year.
Thank you.